Hello, everyone, and welcome to Family Engagement, Communication, and Culture Module 1. Today, we're going to focus on communication. My name is Christy Leader, and I'm a family and community educator with the Family and Community Education Center, housed at the Westchester Institute for Human Development's Community Service Network.
And I am your co-presenter, Audrey Brutus, and I am the Culturally Responsive Education Specialist, and I work with the Lower Hudson Regional Partnership Center, where our role is to really focus on improving the outcomes for students with disabilities across our component school districts through technical assistance and professional development. And we are housed at the Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. So as Christy shared, we are going to be talking about family engagement today and really looking at the importance of communication and culture, and in trying to recognize why it's even important to really be having this discussion with you today. We're going to look at what the research has shown when it comes to family engagement. So according to the research, consistent research, family engagement leads to higher grades and test scores. It leads to better attendance, positive attitudes and behavior, higher graduation rates, increased participation in more challenging academic programs, more classes being passed and credits being earned by our students, and overall better social skills and adaptation to school. So again, the research really tells us that all of these are positive impacts of family engagement, and that parents and caregivers really, they already know this and they really want this for their children. And family engagement really does have an impact on how children learn and the skills that they develop in schools. So family and staff, which are us, the educators, really have to be encouraged to engage in open communication and develop meaningful relationships with our families and our students. And to start off this conversation, I want to bring you to the blueprint for improved results for students with disabilities. Now, this guideline is released by the New York State Ed Department, and it's really a guideline to help guide our work in improving outcomes for students with disabilities. And this is important for our conversation today because one of the key concepts or key principles of the guideline you'll see here highlighted in red and also underlined, please read along with me as well, is that parents and other family members are engaged as meaningful partners in the special education process and the education of their child. So you'll note here that students with disabilities and their parents have really essential rights that are afforded to them throughout the special education process, and those rights are really given to them both under federal and state laws. And this training is really to help support staff at schools and districts to really reflect on the previous experiences that they've had in engaging with families, and also to look at it through the lens of this blueprint, and also, which we'll talk about in a later module, the culturally responsive sustaining education framework, which was released last year by the State Department as well, to really get more of a understanding of what we're talking about when we're discussing family engagement. This is a larger workshop, but for the purposes of today, we're going to kind of break it up in a little module. And for this first module, we're really going to focus on this initial learning objective, which is really to examine the impact of culture and communication in our practice as educators.
So let's take a look at this wonderful quote from Maya Angelou together. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I think this is particularly important when we think about families and families who are trying to work with districts and support their children through the special education process, because as Audrey explained earlier, the parents' input and engagement with the process, really does have a profound impact on how their students will do with the schools. And so some of the impacts of communication, effective communication are, it builds trust, improves relationships, and promotes team building. It provides clarity and helps prevent and solve problems. And it improves engagement of all involved while also improving productivity, moving all groups closer to their goals. So in our office at the Family and Community Engagement Center, we work quite a bit with families who often reach out to us when they're struggling with the services that their child's getting or their partnership with the district. And I can tell you from talking to many families and my colleagues in our office that one of the biggest problems that families do seem to face is just miscommunication. A lot of the problems that families face with the districts and with getting their kids services and navigating the education process with their students is really a lot about miscommunication. Sometimes families don't understand what's going on or what's happening as part of the process, or sometimes they don't feel heard or that their child's needs aren't being addressed. So often just trying to open up those lines of communication between the family and the district in a positive way can resolve a lot of conflicts that occur. So for us, we hope one of the things that you take away from this training today is that there are things that you can put in place beforehand to get you and the families together in a smooth line of communication so that problems are less likely to occur and you can function more as a team. And what we all want as team members is the wonderful outcomes of the children that we work with. And that's much easier when we're working together as a team from the beginning than to go back and try to address issues that are coming up. So let's talk a little bit more about communication and culture and how this plays out for families together.
And Christy, do you mind if I share, just because as you were talking about effective communication, it really made me think of my past work. So I didn't share this with you guys, but I, by trade, am a psychologist. And I used to work as a school psychologist in a district where there was an in-district program for children that have significant emotional or behavioral difficulties. And I can attest to the fact that effective communication ended up having more positive outcomes for these specific students who had these disabilities, in that prior to these children coming into the program, I made it a point of having like an in-depth intake with parents, really to build a relationship with them, because for their children coming into this program, it was like the end of the road for the children. It was like one step away from an out of district placement. So they had really been through a lot already at that point with their students, and the students had been as well. So I recognized the importance of forming an alliance with them, and also understood it would make my life easier moving forward if we were all on the same page. And let me tell you that over time, this program, when I first went into the program, it was like it was 2 classes that had a total of 24 students in it. Like over time, we ended up with like 3 students, because many students ended up transitioning out of the program, going back into sometimes general education or least restrictive settings. And the children who had the families that were most engaged are the children who did the best and transitioned out of this program. So it's really, really important to form, kind of, as Christy was saying, that initial piece of the importance of effective communication, building trust, and promoting team building and improving relationships, how important that could be for students with disabilities and their outcomes. Sorry,
Absolutely.
Christy, I just wanted to share
Absolutely.
that.
Yes, thank you. I think for us, it's always important for us to think about the fact that we're all in this together and we all want the same general outcome, right? For the students to do well.
Right.
And I think parents often get the message that the school is against me, they don't want what's best for my child. And being an educator, I'm a teacher by trade myself, I know that that's never true. The school is not against you, but often it's the miscommunication that leads to parents feeling either isolated or left out of the process or really not understanding.
Right.
So one thing about communication that's important for us to remember, it's effective when both the sender and the receiver agree on the message. So it's not just about what you're saying, but it's also about how you're listening and how the person you're communicating to is hearing your message. So, the first way that people communicate is through verbal language. And these are the words that you say. And I think for this in particular, some things for us as professionals when working with families in the special education process to remember about the verbal piece of this is that often language can be a barrier. Sometimes parents, particularly who aren't, English is not their first language, a lot of the words can be thrown around and they may not fully understand what that is. I know in my house, we're very fortunate that I'm an educator. So when we go into meetings for my own children, and my oldest has an IEP, I understand the language that's being thrown around, and we take that for granted sometimes, but parents don't always. So it's important that the language we use is also understandable for parents, that we're not throwing around acronyms or terms that they may not be familiar with, because that can be very scary. Something else to consider with your verbal communication with families is we should always try to be strength-based. It's really hard for a family to come into a meeting and just hear all about what's wrong with my child. It's really important to take the time to talk about the progress the child is making, the things that are working. We want to give the parents hope that we're in this together and that, we care about their child and not just giving a list of what's wrong. The next part of communication, when you're the sender of communication, is your tone. And I think that this, again, is really important because it's often not what we say, but how we say it. Those of us that are professionals in this field, we know that we can have IEP meetings 10 scheduled in a day. We have a tight schedule. We have, frustrating things that we're dealing with. And sometimes when a parent comes in, we might be short or abrupt and not realize it. And the parent may think it's personal when it's really not. So it's really important to remember that your tone really does matter. Are you rushed? Are you welcoming? Are you giving parents a chance to ask questions?
And also, Christy, how many times have we seen, because we were talking about English language learners and parents who don't speak English, how when they come into a school, sometimes educators will speak to them louder, in a louder tone, as if somehow if you speak louder, they'll be able to now grasp the English words coming out of your mouth. So when parents speak another language, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not deaf, right? It's just a
Right,
matter of a language. So
right,
I see that so many times, and I always cringe when I see people do that, but
right.
that's something
And
to consider with tone.
absolutely. And as I said before, we're all rushed. I know you might be in a rush, but again, speaking as a parent, when we're talking about my child, I have all the time in the world. I'm not in a hurry to get out of this meeting. So, we have to make sure to pace ourselves and give parents the opportunity to process and share their own thoughts too. And the final piece to this communication, when you're the communicator, is your body language. And I like to include not just your own body language, but sort of the message that you're sending from the physical environment as well. Something as simple as how your room where you're having and conducting your meetings and conferences, how that's set up can have a big impact on the way parents feel coming into the room. Are you behind a table so there's an us versus them? Or can you be sitting next to each other at a round table so it conveys the feeling of we're in this together? Is the room open and welcoming? Are you looking down at paper, or are you actually making eye contact and engaging in conversation with the parents? Sometimes we're busy with our checklist of things to do, and we're busy looking at the checklist instead of engaging with the parent. And, we can send a message that, we have an agenda and we don't want to hear from you by doing that sort of thing. So, thinking about how the room is set up and how you go into these meetings is really important. And we're going to get into sort of at the end some tools that we have at my office at the Community Support Network that can help you reach out to parents before meetings even occur, to allow them to kind of talk about their child and gather some information about their child that might help the communication begin before you're even speaking to each other in person. And the other part of communication is, as I said earlier, it is a give and take. It's not just about you speaking. Communication also means that you're a listener. And this quote says, two people from different cultures can look at the same event and have very different reactions because of the meaning that they attach to the event. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And when we get into culture a little bit more later on in the second module, we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth. But the job of the committee and the team together and communicating with families is also to allow parents to have their voice in the conversations and in the planning. So even the person who's being wonderful and communicating kindly and gently, if you're not listening to the parent and being an active listener, then they may not feel an important part of the process as well. So it's really important, as I said, that you're making that eye contact, that you're allowing the parents time to talk, and that you're really taking into account what it is that they're saying.
And Christy, you're highlighting a good point of that there's a difference between being a good listener good listener, excuse me, and an active listener. And the idea that regardless of the situation, each person coming into it brings with them their own kind of personal and group values, you know, depending on what cultures that they're from. Those cultures have their own kind of rich histories, identities, as well as stereotypes that they might have about other people that don't belong in that culture, and sometimes even in-group stereotypes. And that might impact how they feel when interacting with people who are not necessarily from their inside group or from within their cultures. So all these pieces really have to be considered when we're talking about culture and exploring how it plays a role in all our lives.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've learned is that not every person, just personality wise, and not every culture encourages people going in and asking hard questions of teachers. Often we're taught that, you know, we should go in and just listen and not be rude or disrespectful to authority figures. So it's important that we, you know, really set the stage for parents to feel like they can bring up their concerns. Sometimes we say to families, you know, do you have any concerns? No. Okay, moving on. You know, can we ask questions that will engage parents? How do you feel about this? Do you think this is a good program for your child? You know, because not everyone's going to interrupt and give their feelings so easily. Sometimes parents need a little bit of support with that give and take.
And with that, you know, we just want to leave you with this reflective piece to connect, compare, and recall. So what we mean by this is, you know, for connecting, considering what Christy has shared about the components of communication when she was speaking about verbal, the words that we're using, the tone, how we're saying what we're saying, our body language, and whether or not we're engaging in active listening, make a connection between these components and how you've actually communicated as an educator to your families and to your students. For compare, make a comparison to see if whether or not you see similarities and differences between the way that you communicate with your families and students and the way that you see your peers or your colleagues in the school or district, if that's where you're working, communicate with the parents and students. Do you see similarities in your communication styles? Do you see any differences? And if you do, what are they? And lastly, recall if you've ever had an experience with a parent or family or guardian where you both had completely different reactions to the same exact event. Is it possible that there was something about the way that event was communicated that may have impacted the way it was received or the way that it was heard? So hopefully, you know, you're able to take these pieces that we've discussed here in this first module, and this would lead us into a future conversation about diving deeper into culture and what that means and how that plays a role into the work that we do. And
So, you know, I just want to welcome you to share my information with your families. There's my email address there and our website as well. And you're welcome as professionals to reach out also. But if you go to our website, you'll see there are some forms there that can help parents prepare for IEP meetings and annual reviews. We do have a form, a worksheet where parents can write down where they feel their child's strengths are, what challenges they're facing. And that's something that you can send out to parents beforehand to help them gather their thoughts and get ready for a meeting. And again, I think it just really sets the stage for good communication. You're saying to these parents, look, I care about, you know, your child and what you think about what's best for your child. I want to hear from you. And for some parents that aren't as comfortable speaking in a meeting, they can submit it to you and you can read it over and have a little more insight into, you know, where that parent comes from. So feel free to, you know, check out the resource on our website. We have many, and reach out, you know, anytime. If you have any questions or want to engage more in conversations, or if your families need support.
And also, you can also reach out to me here at this email, abrutus@pnwboces.org. If you are in a district and you have any questions around the areas of equity, disproportionality, supporting English language learners, or any type of cultural responsive kind of concerns or questions that you may have, I am definitely here at your disposal, and you can reach out to me here too. Please also, for sure, as Christy shared, go to that website and check out the tools and resources that they have that you can directly provide to your parents and your families. And they also, the FACE Center provides a lot of direct assistance to parents as well. Correct, Christy?
provide direct assistance. We also do a lot of trainings for families as well. So, you can, again, take a look at the website and see what types of trainings we offer. Districts often have us come in and do training for parents on how to prepare for your annual review or transitioning from CPSE to CSE. We're really there to help support that bringing together of the family component and the district component in any way possible.
Okay, and thank you so much for joining us for this first module. We look forward to seeing you at the second module, again, which will focus on culture and diving deeper into that and what that looks like in our work. Again, thank you and have a
Thank
great day.
you. Have a great day,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.